Okay, think about that jar of mayonnaise sitting in your fridge right now. We put it on everything, right? We slather it on sandwiches, we mix it into potato salads, and it's the perfect creamy base for hundreds of dressings and dips. It's rich, it's tangy, and it's just everywhere. But here's the truly wild part. Mayonnaise, technically, shouldn't even exist. I'm serious. It's a stable mixture of oil and water, and as we all learned in science class, those two famously do not mix. So how in the world do these giant factories defy basic chemistry to pump out millions of jars of perfect, creamy mayo every single day? Well, let's dive in and find out. To really get how they pull this off, we have to start with the fundamental scientific challenge itself. We're calling it the creamy conundrum. The whole secret comes down to one key concept: emulsification. An emulsion is what you get when you take two liquids that absolutely hate each other, like oil and water, and you force them to get along in a stable mix. In mayonnaise, you have countless microscopic droplets of oil just floating, or suspended, in a water-based mixture. And that's what creates that smooth, familiar texture we all know. So, how do you make this impossible mixture possible? Well, it all comes down to a few key players, the essential ingredients. The first thing that might shock you is just how much of mayonnaise is oil. I mean, look at this. It makes up a staggering 75%, sometimes even more. It's the absolute backbone of the whole thing. It's where that rich flavor and creamy mouthfeel comes from.
But the true hero here, the ingredient that makes all the magic happen, is the humble egg yolk. See, yolks contain this powerful natural emulsifier called lecithin. It's this special molecule that has one end that loves oil and another end that loves water. So it literally grabs onto both of them and holds them together.
Now, before those yolks can work their magic, they're pasteurized, which just means they're heated gently to kill off any bad bacteria, making everything safe to eat. Okay, so with all the ingredients prepped and ready, we finally get to the heart of the operation. The incredible high-speed magic of emulsification.
Now, creating an emulsion is a surprisingly delicate dance. You can't just dump everything in a bowl and hit mix. The oil has to be added very gradually to the water and yolk base. If you go too fast, the whole thing will break and you're left with a separated, oily, gloopy mess.
And this is exactly what's at stake. On one side, you have that perfect, creamy, uniform emulsion we want. On the other, you have a broken emulsion, a total culinary disaster. In a factory that's making thousands of jars an hour, there's just no room for that kind of error.
To guarantee a perfect mix every single time, factories use these absolute beasts called high-shear mixers. These things are industrial powerhouses, spinning at an incredible 3,000 revolutions per minute. That creates such a violent force that it literally tears the oil apart into microscopic droplets. How small are we talking? Well, these oil droplets get sheared down to just 1 to 5 microns in size. To put that into perspective for you, a single human hair is about 70 microns thick. So yeah, they are ridiculously tiny. And that microscopic size is the secret to creating a tightly packed, stable, and super creamy final product. But making the mayonnaise is really only half the battle. Now comes the super rigorous science of quality control. You've got to make sure every single jar has that perfect consistency.
First up, and most importantly, is safety. The acidity, or the pH level, is constantly being monitored. Keeping it below 4.1 is absolutely critical because that acidic environment makes it impossible for nasty bacteria to grow.
Next, you have to nail the texture. Technicians use a device called a viscosimeter. It's a fancy name, but all it does is measure the mayo's viscosity, or in simple terms, its resistance to flow. This is how they guarantee it's not too runny and not too thick. And just before we go, here are a few fun Mayo facts for you. It was supposedly invented way back in 1756 to celebrate a French military victory. Also, Americans love this stuff so much, they spend over $2 billion on it every single year. And you know how mustard is usually an ingredient? Well, it's not just there for flavor. Mustard is also a secondary emulsifier, helping the egg yolk do its job.
So, the next time you open a jar of mayonnaise, are you going to see it as just some simple condiment? Or are you going to see it for what it really is, a marvel of industrial food science?